grinning because it's great when we all get together, you know, there's like, things don't go exactly right, you know, sometimes. And phones and beeps and clicks and people you don't know, and hand meet foot and foot meet hand, you know, you have Paul saying, I were a, you know, why should the hands, you know, it's been a long time, I don't know about you, but my hands haven't met my feet in a long time. Who here can touch their toes? You can, you can, you can, you can. Who cannot? Me. I haven't touched my toes in a long, without bending my knees. Of course, if you bend your knees. Anyway, Paul talks about all this, and he's talking about his church, and I want to talk about that today. How many people do you think it takes to have church? I remember when I was going to St. Timothy's, I used to think all it took was Father Tom and Artis, really. Oh, Artis, she'd come in 2 or 3 days a week and volunteer in the office, and she wasn't paid anything. And then Tom would come a couple of days a week, Father Tom. And I thought that's all it took, really. Those two could run the church all by themselves. Little did I know, it takes a lot more than that to have a church, to run a church. I mean, I get to see what all of you do in terms of volunteering and giving and being and showing up and everything you do in the community and everything you do here. And it's a ton. It's a ton. How many do you think people are too many in a church? One more than what we have now? How many do you think is too many? How many do you think is too few to have church? You know, there are churches in this panhandle, Episcopal churches, that have 6, 7, 8. What does Hindersburg have on a good day? 4, 5 people, and they're having church. They're having church because Mother Karen and Father Bob typically, once in a great while myself, drive down there and do communion. But you can get too small to have church. I think you can get too large to have church. You know, there are churches around, maybe not so much around here, but if you've ever been to like Mitchell Korean or one of those, or if you go to a big city, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 people on a Sunday. I mean, that's what they always say, more money, more problems. That's kind of a deal, right? More people, more. Can you imagine? All those folks, more problems. I think there's a sweet spot for churches. At least Episcopal churches, there's a sweet spot. I think big enough to survive and thrive, but not so big that you can't be kind of a family. You know? In church business, the size, I think, and I've been saying this since I got here, and I'll say it till I'm dead. I think it's about 150 on a Sunday. I think that's the sweet spot. And we've been growing, you know, toward that number, but we're not there yet. But I think that's the place where, listen, you're not too full on a Sunday if you have 2 or 3 services, and you're not too small to survive. You can always survive, I think, at that size. It's a nice pastoral-sized church, I think. Okay. Now, why, if there's just a few of you, why come to church at all, I guess, is a good question. Like, what can you do in church that you can't do other places? I know people who are involved in service all over, not just the community, but the state or the country or the world. People get involved in service, but they don't do it in church. You don't need church necessarily to do that. You could come in here any day of the week, and you could sit in that pew right there and you could pray. Right there, where you're at right now. You could pray. You could even come together. Would that be church? No. It's praying, yeah. It's not the same thing that we do when we do church. You can come by yourself. But church is not a solo thing. Church is not something you do on your own. You can go serve in the world on your own, but you can't really do church on your own. Do you know how many people it takes to make a sacrament? First of all, do you know what a sacrament is? Now, The sound you just heard is all of your brains clicking off. No, Father Mark, not a lecture about sacraments, blah. A sacrament, as you learn in catechism, is an outward visible sign of an inward invisible grace giving to us a sure and certain hope that we have received such grace. Right? Did I get that right, Lutheran? Yes, I did. Lutherans, they got to know this stuff now.
Yeah.
How many do we have? Correct, 7. And that was in all your minds, right? And we won't name them, but we have 7 sacraments. The 2 big ones that we do all the time, and the big ones are baptism and communion. How many people does it take to make a sacrament? Correct. 2. Good going. Now, you can, in other words, if I show up here by myself, if I would have come in at 8 o'clock and forgotten there was 9 o'clock church, and I've been here all by myself, I couldn't have communion. It takes 2 people to have communion. One of them has to be a priest or a bishop, right? But it takes at least 2 to do a sacrament. Of course, God shows up. Yes. So that's kind of 3, but God, you know. So, sometimes God shows up and we get puffed up. Sometimes when God shows up, we take the credit for the work that God is actually doing. God shows up in a sacrament. It's not me, it's not Bob, it's not Karen. It's God showing up, that where the work happens. Yeah. We forget that it's God and we think it's us, and that's what's going on in Paul's church. In Paul's church, they planted in Corinth. It started with a small group of people, probably no larger than us, right? Probably just a few, and then more, and then more, and then more. And then it got big enough that it just turned into chaos. If I had to title this sermon, I would call it Chaos in Corinth. Or Cacophony in Corinth. Because all these people have been given the gift of God's Holy Spirit in a way that today we don't necessarily exercise in the Episcopal Church. But you're talking about people who have the gift of prophecy, standing up and giving prophecy. People who have the gift of tongues, standing up and speaking out in a strange tongue. People standing up and healing, and all that. It's cacophony going on at service. And Paul has to straighten things out. He says, look, you've all been given a great gift, the gift of God's Holy Spirit, but we got to figure this thing out because we can't get anything done. So the first question Paul has to answer is, how are we going to keep order? So he does. He says, listen, if you have a word of knowledge or something that God is giving you, stand up. But when it's your turn, and someone else, don't just shout out, that's what it means. Stand, raise your hand, or wait till your turn. So he's saying, let's get it in order. The second thing he has to tell them is there's no privilege among the gifts. There's no privilege among the gifts. First of all, you will have all been given gifts. Second of all, every gift has equal status in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the community, in the church, right? So he goes through this whole thing right before the chapter we got today, where he says, listen, the tongues aren't better than the healings, not better than prophecy, not better than this. All of it we need. Now, the next chapter we're going to get next week. Wait, you got to come back next week. Because next week is chapter 13. You all know that. Who here has had a wedding where they've had Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 13, right? If I speak in the tongue of men and of angels, and have not love, right? We get to that. He says, I'm going to show you a better way than all these other gifts. And that turns out to be love. But sticking in what's today, he's saying all these gifts are the same. They do not rank. They're the same, even though they look different. They sound different. They act different. In the eyes of God, it's a gift from God, and it's all the same. So if you don't have the gift of tongues, which I particularly do not have, it's okay. If you have the gift of healing, which I do not have, it's okay. What gift do I have? Blabbing. That's my gift. I don't know what yours is. Mine is joy and humor and talking, right? I don't know what yours is, but we need yours. We need yours. Prophecy, preaching, service, healing, tongues are all the same, from the same source, for the same purpose, to build up the church, that's what they're given to you for, and to encourage the saints, that's what they're given to you for, and especially to glorify God. That's why you've been given the gift that you've been given. No ranking among them, all equal, all good, all are necessary. You are necessary. Hear me. We can't have church without you. You. Every one of you. So is your whole pew. Look to your right and your left. Those people are necessary. We can't have church without them. Some of them are feet, some of them are hands, some of them are ears, some of them are eyes, some of them are prophets, some are healers, but we need all of you. What about the ones who aren't here today? We need them. Right? We need them too. We need everybody to make a church. Okay, everybody has a gift. Every gift matters, and every gift is needed. Okay, today, what are you getting at, Father Mark? Annual meeting. The annual meeting. Paul didn't know that his text would be used this way, right? But anyway, today we're going to celebrate all that we've done together this year, and we're going to dream about what might be possible in the future. That's what we're going to do. Your gifts are needed. Your gifts for this community are necessary. Your presence is appreciated. What do I say every time when you're leaving and I'm shaking hands in the back, assuming you don't skirt out the front, right? I say, thanks for coming. I don't know where it comes from. It's just what I have. It's just what I think of. Because I'm so thrilled that you're here, right? Your presence is appreciated. Your presence is critical. Doing church successfully requires faith to share your unique God-given gifts and grace to allow others to share theirs. You have to make space for others. And I just want to thank you for now 5.5 years of allowing me to walk with you in this amazing, messy, difficult, frustrating, beautiful blessing that is this church. It has been a great joy for me, and I am beyond thankful for the opportunity to be with you. In you, I experience Christ. In each other, we find the fullness of the Holy Spirit. When we gather together in faith and grace, we find ourselves, believe it or not, in the very presence of the living God.